You heard of Greenwich Mean Time? Well, it was standardised in 1884. They figured the best place to do it from would be Greenwich, because most of the world's trade came through Greenwich on the Thames. And they thought that was one of the reasons. The other reasons I'll tell you later. But one of the main reasons is because the docks were so busy, because they were the busiest docks in the world, they figured it would make sense if the world's standard time started at Greenwich, prime meridian between the eastern and western hemispheres. There was the line in Greenwich. You can stand on the eastern hemisphere, 1 foot on the eastern hemisphere, 1 foot on the western hemisphere, which is kind of weird. So we're going through an area called Limehouse. Limehouse and Shadwell. Limehouse is called Limes because of the medieval lime kilns that used to be here. It also was the old Chinatown. We used to have a Chinatown right here in Limehouse. But the Chinatown was bombed during the Second World War, like all of this area was heavily bombed during the Second World War. And Chinatown moved from Limehouse into Soho, into Gerrard Street. Soho, again, we're going to be going around Soho. I'll point that out to you. One of my favourite places in London, certainly. Great place to go out, great bars, great restaurants. Top place. St Mary's Shadwell on the left-hand side, St Anne's Shadwell rather. This is where Thomas Jefferson, the American president's parents, were born. And when they moved to Virginia, they set up a colony there, and some of the villages around there are called Shadwell after this Shadwell here in England. So Limehouse, again, an area where Dickens used to spend a lot of time because his uncle lived here as a rope maker, making ropes for the shipyards. Charles Dickens, one of our greatest writers, 19th century, great Victorian writer, great Londoner in many, many ways. Walked London, documented London in the 19th century. Go on the right hand side, we're going to see St George in the east. Sorry, St Anne's Limehouse. This is Hawksmoor. We're going to talk about one great architect, a man called Christopher Wren, the greatest British architect there's ever been. Now, he's responsible for the rebuilding of the City of London after the Great Fire of London in 1666. We're going to talk about a little bit about that when we get in. But his great student, his great number 2, was a man called Nicholas Hawksmoor. And this is one of his great churches here. St George in the East here. I get my Hawksmoors mixed up. It is St George in the East. Now, they say that Hawksmoor is a very imposing building. It dates from around 1720. And it's a very, very imposing building. You'd say that you don't want to get married in a Hawksmoor church, but you would want to have your funeral there, because there's something quite foreboding about a Hawksmoor church. Now, we're coming into an area behind all here. This is an area known as Wapping. Now, Wapping, again, during the time when London had the busiest docks, it was a thriving place in terms of you didn't want to get drunk in Wapping in the 18th century, because often if you were drunk in Wapping, you would have been press ganged. And what that means is you would have been collected, put on a ship, and drafted into the British Navy. So you'd wake up with a hangover, find yourself at sea, and I not really know how on earth you got there, but it was called press ganging, and it was a very, very common occurrence. So Wapping, a lot of the names in London, they're Anglo-Saxon. What I mean by Anglo-Saxon is sort of the Dark Ages, around between the 5th and the, say, 10th century, Anglo-Saxon. And Wapping comes from Whopper, a chieftain, an Anglo-Saxon chieftain was called Whopper. So it's Whopper's people, it's called Wapping. And there's an expression. You've heard of the expression, what a whopper? Something that is big, bloated, what a whopper, English expression. For those of you at the front will get their first glimpses of the Shard here. The Shard is the tallest building in Western Europe, and only recently been completed. And it's called the Shard. I don't actually know its proper name, but in London we like nicknaming buildings. The Shard, the Gherkin, and it's called the Shard because it looks like a shard of glass. So here's St Catherine's Dock. We're coming very close to the Tower of London now, so get your cameras ready. So Wapping, the expression what a whopper, because there was a thing called Execution Dock just over here. Those people who had committed crimes at sea were executed. They were hung, and then the tide, because London, the Thames, the tidal river, would wash over their bodies 3 times, and the bodies would be grotesquely bloated, and the expression whopper comes from there. So we're coming into the main part of London now. the City of London. Look to your left here. This is the Tower of London. There we have the Tower of London, built by William the Conqueror in 1080. It is one of the truly iconic images of London. There it is, 1,000 years of history. It is where the crown jewels are kept. It is where the beefeaters patrol. It is where the ravens live. It is over the years it's been a menagerie. It's been a place of prison. It's been a place of execution. And going into the Tower of London, you need a good afternoon to walk about. It's like stepping back in time. The main tower there, the sort of central keep with the 4 turrets, that is the oldest part. That dates from 1080, and the rest of it dates from, well, really the 1200s. Used to be a moat. The moat was cleared in the 19th century. And then we get a first glimpse of the Thames there, just on the left-hand side. And we have the Mayor's office. Boris Johnson is the Mayor of London. Did a great speech at the end of the Olympics, quite a character. And his offices are just directly opposite the Tower of London, across the Thames there. So the Tower of London is where Henry VIII, you heard of Henry VIII? Henry VIII's 2 queens who were executed, Anne Boleyn, Catherine Howard, were executed at the Tower of London. So we're coming into the City of London. Look to your left, you see these dragons, and look to your right. The dragons are the symbol of the City of London. We are now in the Square Mile. All Hallows by the Tower. This is where the great diarist Samuel Pepys witnessed the Great Fire of London on the 2nd of September 1666. Thomas Fariner, a baker, lived in Pudding Lane, forgot to put his fire out. And London was unseasonably hot. And a very unusual easterly wind came, and London lit up like a tinderbox. 80% of London was destroyed. Miraculously, less than 10 people were killed, but 80% just decimated. So a great rebuilding project that occurred. But London, the City of London, the Square Mile, where it now, was built on its old medieval street system. So London, although a lot of the buildings are relatively new, if you look to your left here, for example, this building here, this church here, built by Christopher Wren after the Great Fire of London. Christopher Wren was